It's difficult to condense an entire 200-year period into a single 15-minute video, but someone had to try, right? So let's go. The Crusades were a series of religious expeditions sanctioned by the Latin Church in the medieval era with the goal of reclaiming the Holy Land from Muslim rule. But they weren't just one cohesive effort. They were a series of campaigns that took place over 2 centuries between 1095 and 1291. The First Crusade would be the most successful, ending in the establishment of 4 Crusader states in the Levant, which remained there until the Seventh Crusade. However, subsequent crusades would only partially achieve their goals or fail entirely due to internal conflict and disorganization. Regardless, the Crusades had a massive impact on European history and the medieval world as a whole. So here's our visual timeline of the Crusades, starting with the First Crusade in 1095. For context, at this time, most of the Middle East was ruled by Muslim dynasties after the Islamic conquests of the 7th century. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire was hanging on by a thread, and the Pope wanted to stop the Muslims from taking Rome. In 1095, Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade during the Council of Clermont. He claimed that the Byzantine emperor had asked for help against the rising power of the Seljuk Turks, who were threatening to take Constantinople. This was a lie, but it was a good excuse to kickstart a crusade anyway, and the call to arms was very effective. European nobles flocked to the banner of the cross, eager for adventure, loot, and land. Estimates suggest about 40,000 men assembled under the banner of the cross and began their march east in 1096. This force would soon be joined by another 30,000 men, led by the French nobleman Godfrey of Bouillon. It was massive compared to other medieval armies, though not quite as large as some of the Mongol hordes, and it headed straight for the Byzantine capital. Along the way, the Crusaders got a little excited and sacked the city of Nicaea, even though it wasn't their target. Nicaea was quickly followed by Constantinople. So the Crusaders had a quick chat with Emperor Alexios Komnenos, who informed them that he didn't actually ask for their help, and he was too keen on having his city ransacked again. Although he allowed them to stay in his empire, he warned them not to cause any more trouble. Ignoring him, the Crusaders began sacking cities along the Bosporus, Strait and the Anatolian coast, before heading south to the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Once they reached it, the Crusaders laid siege. But the Arab defenders held out for 2 months before the Crusaders took the city. This marked the end of Christian rule in Jerusalem dating back to the time of the Roman Empire. And now, it was the capital of a new Crusader kingdom. The Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem was established in 1099, and Godfrey of Bouillon was elected the first king of Jerusalem. It was a resounding victory, and it proved to be a massive propaganda win for the Catholic Church, which had successfully united Europe under one banner. However, many Europeans were less enthusiastic about crusading after seeing how the Byzantines treated their supposed allies. There was also the small matter of the Crusaders pillaging across the Near East and committing atrocities against civilians. Still, the Pope was feeling pretty pleased with himself, so he declared the Kingdom of Jerusalem a holy order of knighthood and offered indulgences to anyone who joined the defense of the kingdom. That was basically free passage to heaven if you died fighting for the Lord. It was a great deal, and plenty of Europeans took him up on it. After a few decades of peace, things kicked off again when the Muslim leader Saladin recaptured Jerusalem in 1187. This prompted the Third Crusade, which would see the likes of Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus lead European forces into battle. When news of Jerusalem's capture reached France, King Philip decided to declare war on Saladin, enlisted the help of King Richard I of England and Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa. The German and English contingents met up with the French at the Siege of Acre, which had been ongoing since 1189. But Saladin managed to escape with his fleet, which made him a legend among Muslims. Meanwhile, Richard and his knights got to show off their glorious chivalrous streak by letting the common folk of Jaffa live. But not before they relieved themselves on their catapults, of course. Fortunately, the next day, Richard contracted malaria and nearly died. Once he recovered, he signed the Treaty of Jaffa with Saladin, granting Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem while allowing Saladin to keep the city. Neither side really achieved anything, but at least they could claim victory through the power of friendship. As always, though, one Crusader state remained. After a decade of relative peace, Louis IX of France decided to lead the Seventh Crusade to the Holy Land. But it was a total disaster. In 1250, Louis landed in Egypt with 50,000 men, expecting the local sultan to surrender immediately. Instead, they laid siege to the city of Damietta, but they were forced to retreat after contracting malaria once again. To make matters worse, Louis got captured along with most of his army and spent 7 years in an Egyptian prison before being ransomed. But hey, at least he got some R&R, probably. Back in Europe, Pope Innocent IV called for another crusade and tasked the future King Edward I of England with the mission of recapturing Jerusalem. Edward gathered an army and set sail for the Holy Land, but the Venetians who were supposed to ferry his men over went on strike for more money. After 5 long months, Edward finally arrived in Acre, only to find that the Mongols had shown up and destroyed everything. At this point, everyone was sick of the Crusades, so Edward spent most of his time building fortifications instead of going on military campaigns. He did manage to capture a few cities, but the conquest of Jerusalem was beyond the scope of what people were willing to put up with in the 13th century. After spending a few years securing the coast, Edward sailed home to England with most of his army. Meanwhile, the Mamluk Sultanate, who were formerly Mongolian slaves, defeated the Crusader remnants in 1291. This officially ended the Crusader states and Christian presence in the region. While they never recaptured Jerusalem, the Christian kingdoms of the Levant did last for almost 2 centuries, and during that time, they developed a unique culture influenced by both Christian and Muslim traditions. The Crusades may have failed, but hummus was born. We covered a lot of ground, including 200 years of European history, but hopefully you learned something. If you want to learn more about the Crusades, check out the description for a bunch of book and video game recommendations. From Jerusalem to Constantinople, the Crusades left their mark on history in blood, faith, and legacy. If this visual timeline helped you understand the scale and sequence of the Crusades, drop a like and tell me in the comments which moment stood out to you most. For more epic timelines and historical deep dives, subscribe to HistoroMystic. New content every week. On Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.